For those who may not be familiar with San Diego Habitat's Women Build, I was lucky enough to have some friends and volunteers join me to give you a sense of what the event is really about. So here's a short video.
San Diego Habitat for Humanity's Women Build event empowers women to create lasting change for local families, helping them build and buy their own homes. Because when a family owns their home, stability and independence follow. So come spend a day with us on a Habitat construction site and experience the power women have when we come together.
So it is International Women's Day, and what a great day for us to open registration for our Women Build event this year. It's also a great day for an in-depth conversation that goes a little bit deeper into the heart of Habitat's home building mission, talking about housing equity. So thank you all for being here with us. Before we get into our great panel conversation, I do have a few housekeeping items. We are recording this conversation, and so it will be shared later this week. Everyone should get the link to that. In order to create the most enjoyable viewing experience, we recommend that you use the Zoom speaker view during our panel discussion. So if you're only seeing me right now, that means you're in speaker view. If you are seeing the amazing Brady Bunch view or Hollywood squares with everybody's faces and names, you're in gallery view. So if you're on a computer, you can change that view in the top right corner of the Zoom window. If you're on an iPad, it's in the top left corner. And if you're on a mobile device, the easiest thing to do is to swipe right for speaker view and left to go back to gallery view. If you have any technical issues at all, please use chat to let us know, and a member of our Habitat team will do our best to help you out. Towards the end of the panel, we will open up for Q&A from all the attendees. So you're welcome to use the chat to ask those questions, or use the raise your hand option that can be found in the participants window of Zoom. Right now, it is my pleasure to turn things over to Xiomara Arroyo, Vice President of Community Relations at Wells Fargo and Vice Chair of the Board of Directors of Habitat in San Diego. So take it away, Xio.
All right, thank you, Karen. And it is such a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for joining. One of the benefits that we have in this virtual environment is the ability to choose where we are, who we're with, and how we get to spend our Monday. And so it is a treasure to have all of you choosing to spend your International Women's Day with us. So what a great way to kick off our Monday, if I do say so. So the topic that we shared today, I know that a lot of the issues that we'll discuss today are important to all of you. That's why you're here. For me personally, the topic of women and housing equity is important to me, not just because I identify as a woman, but more about the responsibilities that I believe that we have to each other to own these issues in society, like so many of us in our past have done for us today. If I think of my role as a volunteer on the board of directors for Habitat for Humanity, I think about the responsibility that we have for our families and what the conversations that we'll have today will mean to their future of their children and generations to come. As a mother, on a more personal note, I think about my 3 young daughters that I dream of a future where they can too benefit from our work today and join us in future conversations like our fantastic panelists that we'll hear from today. So, in speaking of impact to others, I am thrilled to introduce a video that truly inspired me. I saw it last week, and it's made possible by one of our generous partnerships with Lowe. So if we can please play the video.
My favorite memory from the Women Build was stepping away from the house and standing at the sidewalk and just watching all these women build and work on my future house. That was a very happy moment for me.
Smart, lovely women came and just were super supportive. It was like seeing old friends, and we just got to work.
The Women Build work at my house was sponsored by Lowe's. They put their faith, their time, their donations, helping me.
You see, these ladies are having fun. And I think it makes them feel good because they're helping other people build their houses.
It's more enjoyable knowing that you have your house because of your hard work.
Now my daughter's not sick all the time. I started saving. That allowed me to go back to school. And I'm a registered nurse right now.
I teach kindergarten and first grade. This is what I did today with my kindergartners. I don't think that I would have been the mom that I am now if I didn't go through the Habitat program.
It was basically the first time that I could say, this is my house. I'm proud that I could have a place for my daughters where they can feel like this is my home.
My kids don't have to move around anymore. There's nothing in this house that's gonna make them sick. My daughter, so she was 8 months old when we moved in. She hasn't known any other house. This is the only house she's ever known.
Thank you for that video. And as you can see, I was really moved by a lot of these stories. And when I think of these stories, these are our why. This is why we do what we do. When we think of the generations that we celebrate today, all of the women that came before us, women and men, it takes a village, right? All genders. We were their why. And so I look forward to continuing to be that for others. And it's inspiring to have you all with us today. So now I have the privilege to introduce some very special leaders and friends in our community. These remarkable leaders step up, not just for our region, but for our communities, and have the courage to have conversations like these with us today. So without further ado, I would like to start off by introducing Mayor Catherine Blakespear of the city of Encinitas. She has been serving as mayor since 2016. She has family roots that go back to nearly a century in Encinitas. Her great-grandparents moved to Encinitas in the 1920s to grow flowers. As mayor and a representative of the city of Encinitas, she serves on several boards, including as chair of the Sandag Board of Directors, and as a member on the San Diego's Airport Authority, the Encina Wastewater Authority, and the San Elijo Joint Powers Authority, as well as the San Dieguito Water District. Welcome. Next, we have Mayor Alejandra Sotelo-Solis from National City. She was first elected to City Council in 2008 as the second woman ever elected to the council. 10 years later, Mayor Sotelo-Solis was proud to receive overwhelming support to become the first Latina mayor of National City. Mayor Sotelo-Solis is a third-generation National City resident. Regionally, she also serves our community on the board of Sandag, Sweetwater Authority, and MTS. She also serves on the board of the SUHI Foundation, which provides scholarships to students at her alma mater, Sweetwater High School, and the National Association of Latino Elected Officials Educational Fund. Welcome. And last but not least, we have Laurie Holt Feiler, President and CEO of San Diego Habitat for Humanity. Laurie has served as President and CEO of San Diego Habitat since 2012. With over 25 years of community involvement, Laurie also served on the Escondido City Council and then as Escondido Mayor for 3 terms. Laurie's vision for systemic change is a critical impetus and drive for her affordable housing advocacy work, as she serves on the board of San Diego Housing Federation and serves on the board and as chair of the Legislative Committee for Habitat for Humanity California. And she is also very active in many other nonprofit community organizations and region initiatives. Welcome to all 3 of you. And I know if we were in person, you would hear a roaring applause from the group. So just virtual high fives and hand claps for now. So yes, welcome. And as we kick off our panel today, we thought that we could do something fun and would appreciate all of your engagement in this as we honor those that have come before us and truly blaze their trails throughout history by posing a question to all of you. And so we'll ask you to go to the chat for this. And so, we'd like to get your thoughts on this question. In what year do you think women were granted completely equal property rights as men? Now, there's a lot of history that has happened over the years, but specifically, what year do we think women were granted completely equal property rights as men? So please go to the chat. You know, we're not, you know, no one's perfect. We're just looking for some fun here. All right, that's some pretty good answers. Keep them coming. All right, panelists, feel free to participate. Very good. Thank you, thank you. All right, and just a quick hint before I give away the answer. You all remember that it was just in the 1970s that women couldn't even own a credit card. They had to have permission from their husband prior to that. So it wasn't until that time, you know, where we really had more progress there. So the answer is, it was in 1981. So all of you were so close, with a Supreme Court decision that declared laws defining ownership of marital property by gender to be unconstitutional. So, you know, we thought we could honor our predecessors and those that have come a long way. And, you know, we know that it takes a village. It's not all on one person's shoulders, and we are here to continue that work. So thank you all for engaging with us. And so with that, let's continue the engaging conversation with our wonderful panelists. So, you know, first topic of today, and we really want to make this conversational. So, you know, it won't be a question to one particular panelist. We'll all jump in. You know, we mentioned that there's so much progress. There has been so much progress, yet still with women and wages, you know, statistics show that, you know, we're seeing a growing number of women in low wage jobs, especially women of color. So, you know, how are you seeing this in your community? And what is the risk of not prioritizing this issue?
I know we're going to just jump right in.
Yes.
Okay. Feet first. So I have to say again, thank you for the invitation to be part of this panel. Great group of ladies here. Happy International Day of the Woman. And as we talk about wages, we also need to recognize that there's even more discrepancies amongst women of color. And in there, whether it be, you know, so white women, Asian, Latinas, and then African-American women, each one faces, you know, the different challenges. And I believe it's 65 cents to every dollar that a white male makes. Latina makes 65 cents for doing the same exact work, maybe even has more education. And so as we talk about what that means and how we can challenge it, it not only means that we have to have good paying jobs, but we have to be purposeful in our hiring practices, making sure within our policy making, we can ask, are you going to the minority and women-owned businesses? Are you looking at the women and minority-owned contractors? And great leadership, you know, with Chair Blakespear, Mayor, as well as leadership at Sandag. We had a presentation where, you know, it talked about we are doing better and we're meeting like our minimum threshold, which is, I believe, 10%, but we could do more. You know, and I think it's that desire, and then from there it's pipeline, making sure that we have people that are ready to fill that void. And what does that look like? It looks like apprenticeship programs. It looks at STEM or STEAM programs for our youth and our young ladies and our working class communities like National City. We have 10 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 1 high school. Everything feeds into the other. So if we're talking about pipeline, let's talk about STEM, science, engineering, jobs that, whether you're hands-on or on computer, whatever that looks like, it's about having options and making that opportunity available for all, especially those that may have, you know, the digital divide as a real issue. There may be other opportunities to do hands-on programs with NASCO or other entities that are around. So for me, it's all of that, and making sure that we are very purposeful in how we address the issue.
Yes, thank you. Mayor Blakespear?
Yes, those are great points made by my female colleague mayor here, which is exciting. I just want to say thank you to Habitat for Humanity and Lowe's for hosting this, and all of you for participating. And I'll show you my little Empowered Women Build shirt here, which I have and would wear still. Like, I exercise in this shirt because it's got great sun coverage across the arms and the chest, and I love this. And people always look at it, you know, when I'm exercising, they're always looking down to see what it says, and I love that because it's such a pro-woman message. So I volunteered and participated in one of those events. It was so great, and I see both the mayors are wearing pink on International Women's Day. So with that, to get to your question, you know, one of the things that just strikes me again and again is that we've heard about the effects of the pandemic, that it has been the most disproportionate recession ever, in that the lower wage jobs have disappeared and are not coming back, whereas the upper wage jobs are coming back or have come back. And when you look at employment trends, you know, over time, it'll look basically almost like a straight line. But with the lower wage jobs, it's just like they fell off a cliff. But who fills those lower wage jobs? I mean, they are disproportionately women. So it's women who are bearing the brunt of the recession created by this pandemic. And whenever we think about poverty, and you think about somebody living without enough money to put food on the table and pay rent, you know, we have to remember it's a woman. And it's the same thing in older age. Like, what is it that someone who can't live on Social Security looks like? It's women. And so recognizing these overlays of gender on top of the economic realities in this country is really important for us. And I think that it doesn't happen enough, because we talk about it as a low wage job, but we don't really identify that this is really, women are bearing the brunt of it. And it's really important, like my colleague said, Mayor Sotelo-Solis, who I serve with on boards and have great respect for, and she said it's really about pipeline. And in many ways, I think it's really worth emphasizing that, because we all have our own part to play in making sure that when we're hiring or we're promoting, we serve next to women, we elevate them, we help them to succeed. But we also just need to have it systematized. So we have to have it as part of, when you're talking about quotas, and I mean, this is something that was just on the ballot. It was a constitutional amendment that would have repealed something that prohibited the consideration of race, and it didn't pass, you know, but it was one of those things where on the ballot, we had the ability to vote for quotas, to say we want a certain number of people, we want affirmative action. Those are all things that get at how do we create a more equal society. There are lots of ways to get there, but just a free-for-all of saying we're not going to do anything doesn't address systemic racism and systemic sexism that unquestionably affects all parts of our economy. And at the end of the day, it's women whose quality of life is just not as high as men on average. I mean, so you recognize that there's less mobility, there's less ability to live their own best life. And I think that's what we all want, right? We want women to be able to live their best life and have transportation choices and family choices and housing choices and professional choices and religious choices. And so, you know, making it so that we have a society that has that bottom and people aren't falling out the bottom is a really important priority for all of us. And I think women in office particularly recognize that. And that's another important reason to elect women, because there are things that we bring to the decision-making and the policy-making that are just different because we have different life experiences. So thank you for that great question.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to build on that a little more. Anything else to add, Laurie? It's been great.
We can't hear you.
Yep.
Our famous line, "You're muted," for this year. It just add in thinking about what's been said already, is that women have more of the low wage jobs, so then they need more of the affordable housing. And who is affordable housing being built by? Is predominantly a male dominated world. And why can't women be the developers, women of color? And it's because they don't have the access to capital, because you only loan money to your friends that you're already in the business with. So we need to build a different environment so that we can build out of this.
Yes, great points. We can definitely do more. I really appreciated the comments on pipeline and the systemic effort. And I'd like to build a little bit on a couple of things that you all mentioned. You talk about, implications of the pandemic, we've seen the U.S. Labor Bureau statistics share that in December of 2020, women made up 100% of the job losses nationwide, 80% in January. And so we're seeing that experts are saying that women's job recovery from this pandemic, it may take up to 2 years. We'll see recovery in 2024. That's a long time. How has the pandemic impacted housing equity for women? Laurie, would you like to start us off with that one?
Well, we certainly see more women have custody of their children when they're confronted with family divorce. And if women don't have resources to provide proper housing, then their children will suffer academically. It was so moving in the Lowe's video about the child that moved into their home at 8 months old and has never seen another home. You think about the stability that child is going to have throughout their life, just a great foundation so that they can thrive and move forward. So it's just all a part of that. How can we address that very seriously? If we don't address it, there's a lot that's going to happen that's going to be very negative for our entire society.
I'll just jump in and say a few words on that question too. So when affordable housing and attainable housing, so people who being able to afford a place to live we should consider that a fundamental right. In the same way that people need access to medicine, they need access to food, having shelter is one of those things. And we have an imprecise system right now, and we certainly have a market that's not producing it. And so similarly, who bears the burden of that? Where does the brunt fall? And it does fall on women, especially women who are lower wage, living in poverty, minority, and of course, homeless. Things that are just, you imagine the horror of being homeless and having to have children living outside on the streets, and even the things that women uniquely deal with, like their monthly cycle. How are you dealing with that as a homeless woman? Some of these things that never get talked about as the experience of not having a home. And so for us to prioritize making homes affordable and having enough of them. Laurie is doing this great work with Habitat for Humanity, and we have a little project in our city, which I'm so proud we were able to get off the ground. It's not going to change the world, but it's a little something. And if we all do a little something, we can change the world, right? So I think it's really important that we do continue to focus on housing as one of the main things that would help women's lives be better if we could have more housing that was affordable and attainable.
Absolutely, every little bit counts. Yes, Mayor Alejandra?
Yeah, if I could, I'll just share, growing up when my parents were divorced, my mom was the head of household. And there were times where it was either pay the rent or pay the water bill. And there were months where we didn't pay the water bill because we had to pay rent. And it's choices like that where it's either put food on the table or fill in blank, go to the doctor, go to the dentist because your tooth hurts and you have a cavity and it's going to cost, the copay is $200. Well, that's a big chunk of somebody's pay, or if they're on AFDC or if they're on some type of WIC or assistance, it's all of those elements. And so I remember times growing up that we would face that. And so fast forward now, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and those same women, like my mom or my tias who, working and, maybe the work in the hotel industry, those were the ones, the tourism industry was devastated. So as we talk about equity and access to homes, it's recognizing that it's not just one over the other, or one or this, or either or. Everything is intersected, and it really comes down to how we make housing. I would agree with Mayor Blakespear. It's accessible. It should be a human right. but unfortunately, even when a person does have a home, at times it's subpar. And in certain working class communities, they have mold, they have cucarachas or some type of pest, some type of lack of parking, whatever X is. Not that parking is an issue all the time, because we're trying to change the mentality even. But as we talk about just what it means, we need to have good housing stock, and we need to have access to that healthy, good quality of life, and then value those people who have overcome that. One last thing with the applications for assistance, to get rental assistance from the county or any other entity for that matter, it's a 3-step process, and you have to have all your documentation in place. You have to have copies. You have to have you name it. Imagine going to the DMV if you lost your driver's license. You have to have all of these documents to prove who you are. And if you're going to get the real ID, which I just did, you have to prove all those documents too. So, you're having to prove all that. And hell, you're working on getting food for your kids, diapers on your baby, light in the room to make sure. So it's recognizing all of those struggles are real. And it's not just about, oh, well, go get a job. Well, that's not always the case. And well, ask for help. Well, when a person does ask for help, it takes 12 steps to actually getting that assistance. And it may not be immediate. It may be a month and a half down the road.
When we think about the jobs that are not going to recover, and where are women working, and they could be the office workers that are the lower paid ones that are not working from home, or the janitorial service, or you just think about that. And if we don't, so some of us are still able to work, but we can work from home, others are not. And so then I have heard the comment, well, just go get another job. Well, you cannot just go get another job. You've got to have the skills to get that job, and you're not going to make any money at that time. It's very cavalier, and people don't realize that if you don't support families and women, that the fabric of your community disintegrates, and we're all going to pay for it very dearly.
Yes, absolutely. And great points. I also believe that it is a basic right. It should be that way. So thank you for sharing your perspectives. A quick plug I'd like to share before we go into our next question. In about 8 minutes or so, we'd like to hear from our audience. So if you would like to start sending in some questions, Bridget, should they send them to you?
Just plug them into chat, and I'm keeping tabs on anything anybody shares.
Great, thank you. So we'd love to hear from our audience members, especially if there's something that you really wanted to hear today, and we'll check in with you in about 8 or so minutes. So, we talked a lot about, some of the challenges, and let's think about some of the progress forward. So, as we think about, a lot of people are still asking, why is women's housing instability, such a big deal? Is it really an issue? And so when you think of some of the solutions, I know we talked about a couple things, what else comes to mind? And are you seeing anything specifically happening in your community to overcome some of these statistics that you're seeing? And if you want, we can go ahead and start with Mayor Catherine Blakespear.
Yeah, the solutions ultimately, in the big picture, they're people being paid a living wage. Like somebody who's working full time needs to be able to afford the basics. So a living wage, and this is being talked about at a federal level, and luckily in California we're a little bit farther along here, but still, it's like you envision someone who's making $7.50 an hour. I mean, how are they can't possibly support themselves on that. And so having a living wage, having kids in school, like there's no way that women are going to be able to regain participation in the workforce. The school day and year already didn't suit working women very well. So many breaks, and the school day ending early, and and right now the uncertainty around whether it's going to be Zoom or in person, it's nearly impossible for a working parent to plan. Like if someone did have a shift work, you have to have family support or paid support in order to make this work, I think, for families right now. And it's really a very, very heavy burden on women. And that's, I mean, one of the reasons women, I think, have left the workforce, and we see this in the statistics, is because there was just no way to manage the kids at home and their schooling. And so, you know, I'm sure a lot of women are making these different, really difficult trade-offs, thinking they're going to be going back soon, but for this time being, it's just not possible. So, you know, getting the societal structure to be more supportive of women and their prosperity and that of families, you know, that's something that those are really where the solutions are, but they're very difficult to do. And I'll just, you know, one of the questions here, I'll just quickly answer it, because it's like, what's the most difficult part of creating housing stock? There's no question that it's opposition from established communities who don't want more density. I mean, and think about your own neighborhood. How many of you on this call who care about this would say, I'll raise my hand to have higher density near me, because it's your parking, it's your perception of your quality of life. You know, it really goes back to a grassroots problem around getting the political and social will. And when we're able to do that, we're making some progress in it, but when we're able to do that, we'll be able to solve for that a lot faster. But, you know, it's in a very divided period right now when it comes to housing density.
I would say that, you know, in a community like National City, we are one of the most densely populated communities in the county. And that puts us at a deficit when it comes to access to open space, when it comes to incompatible zoning that 50 years ago was okay, where you had homes next to churches, next to auto body shops and transmission shops and freeways. So it's reconciling what we need and and the population growth. Just people are having kids and people are living longer because of medicine. And so it's recognizing that all of these elements play into, and I'll start with the second question first, that it is a challenge. And see, even in our community, I think when we look at housing, some of the things that we look at are access to mass transit, access to the 10-minute community is kind of what we've branded it. And it's a thing. So you can walk or roll in any direction and you can get to a financial institution, maybe Wells Fargo, right? Or you can go to a spot where you can go to entertainment. You can go to a grocery store. You can get you know, some home improvements, maybe from Lowe's, right? You can go to the Restore for the Habitat for Humanity. All of those, there you go. And within 10 minutes, you should be able to access all those elements. But because in many communities outside of National City, they're considered bedroom communities, and it's only single family homes. And when you add density, when you add more people think they miss out. When in actuality, wouldn't it be kind of cool if you could just walk to your coffee shop and not need to get into your car, or walk to your laundry or your dry cleaning service, walk your dog, all this good stuff. So it's also to bringing those perspectives into, you know, communities like ours, which have the density, but may not have had those amenities in that same very purposeful manner. They're sporadic. We've had food deserts. We've had to be very purposeful with bringing in those grocery stores that provide healthy food, changing the corner little tiendita or the little store to having fruit up front versus in the back where all the snacks are at, pushing those back. So it's really addressing the issue. And as moms, you know, I'm the mom of 3 that are distance learning. It's recognizing that it's one day at a time. I would love to be able to say, hey, for everybody, let's open up the schools. I've personally made the choice that my children will not be going back to in school learning, or what is it, in the classroom setting. We're also one of the highest COVID-19 positive cases in the county. We're also have the lowest vaccination rate. We also, you know, I can keep going down the list. So as we talk about equity, it's about recognizing that yes, we are changing, but we still have to be vocal and purposeful and say, we need this here. Look, remember us right here. As somebody who's in the know and at the table, I still have to advocate for more. And I think as we continue talking about equity, it's making sure you have allies, making sure you have partners that recognize that need, that will support you and do when you're not at the table, they will do for you.
I think it's really commendable that National City has really pushed rental assistance, because if you can stabilize the housing costs for your families, and women will be a part of that, they will be able to survive this in a much better place. I mean, that's stabilizing housing is critical.
Absolutely. And on that note of advocacy, you know, let's move on to a little bit about, you know, some of the conversations that we're hearing a lot around zoning. And so we're thinking about, you know, the issues around zoning laws and creating greater inequity in housing. Have any of you considered, you know, addressing what that looks like in your community? And if so, you know, what does that process look like? Let's go ahead and,
I just want to recognize that Mayor Sotelo-Solis does a great job of leading in the ways that she was just saying, and really laying out these overlaying inequities, like we're the lowest amount of vaccination and highest transmission rates and highest density. And I mean, all of those trends, which, you know, when you're looking at anything in a silo, you can forget the bigger picture. And she does a great job for her city and for the region and articulating that and centering it. So I just want to recognize that. So to your question, you know, I feel like the community work, the thing that I'm always working to message is that housing is a good, and we can preserve quality of life and your high standards of living while also providing housing for you as you age, for your kids as they grow and need to afford a place to live, for your parents, for you. You know, so this housing is not for other, it's for you, it's for us. And so the messaging and the community building and the identification of housing as a good instead of housing as a bad, which is what I think historically, especially in Southern California for generations, I mean, there's been the sense of like, we're full, no more people can come here. We don't want any more housing. We don't want any of those of the other, right? Whatever it is, we're closing the door, we're closing the wall at the border, I got mine, and so I don't want you to ruin mine. And so articulating that vision of we have enough. We can make room for people, and we can be a society that provides for all income levels. I think that's the messaging and the community building and the hard work, and trying to forge that through with all of the different overlaying policy decision making. So one of the things that we deal with as mayors is RHNA, Regional Housing Needs Assessment. And so we have had very difficult votes around the numbers and which cities and all of this kind of stuff. And so being willing to stand up in those types of conversations can be really difficult. But you have to have leaders with conviction, and you have to be able to, I think, identify that platform, that governing philosophy, so that you're able to support the policies when they come up before you.
Yes, to ditto to everything that Catherine said. And I think the RHNA, they call it the sausage making because, you know, it's behind the scenes, it's pretty dicey. There's a lot of things that go into it. But at the end of the day, no one's happy because it means that you're going to have to build the housing. And why people aren't happy is because, you know, they may be given a number and you literally have to build or dedicate yourself to getting to that number in 8 years. And if you don't, now legislation tells you that you will get fined, you will get sued, there will be some penalty from the state of California. And as we, you know, continue to work towards, you know, improving those housing options, it's very low, moderate, and above moderate housing types. And you look at, or for income levels, and some communities, very low and low is you're above par, whereas moderate and above moderate may not be the case. So it's creating access to, I guess, that stepping stool of, you know, if you need help and you are in a very low or something that's has a subsidy, very low housing. If you go off to college, you come back, you make that $50,000 a year, you want to buy a condo, you have access to a condo. And then from there, if you want to find a single family home, you know, you can also have access to that in a community, for example, like National City. And it's thinking creatively about your zoning. For us, we have our downtown specific plan where we are going straight up. The highest, the height that we have is about 13 to 14 stories. We've been talking to developers that want to go 30 to 40 stories, which, you know, creates a whole nother issue. One, fire. How does fire department get up to the 40th story? How do you provide resources for people who live in a 40-story building? You know, they have kids, they have dogs, they have, you know, so all of these elements, and parking and access to food, all of these elements that the population actually brings in. But as we focus it in the downtown area, we can actually build it into our buildings themselves. Why not have a grocery store inside of a building that offers housing? Why not have childcare? Why not have flexible fleets that gets you to and from your job site via the trolley? You know, we can get you to the trolley, 8th Street trolley, get you on the trolley, and, you know, you can make your way back via a little, we're calling it the Frank. I haven't told you, Catherine, but we're working on this flexible fleet. In downtown San Diego, they have what's called the Fred, free ride everywhere downtown. Has anybody taken that? The free ride, it's a little electric, like, golf cart. Well, we're calling it the Frank or the Frank. It's the free ride around National City, and in honor and homage to Frank Kimball, even though he's spelled with a K. Just go with it, people. We're gonna go with the Frank, and again, options to get out of your car and get in another mode of transportation. So as you're thinking of the zoning, it's not just single family dwellings, it's multi-unit, it's going up, it's building into the spaces, those community spaces, whether it be a computer lab, a workout space, a childcare facility, and thinking also too about alternative modes of transportation. So they do not have to have a parking spot. And now I'd be interested to know if, you know, how many of my colleagues are considering no parking policies. I know the city of San Diego has, but that's blasphemy. Honestly, that's a tough pill to swallow in any community. But if we're really going to want to lower our greenhouse gas emissions, if we're really going to want to have a healthier Mother Earth, we really have to start changing the way we do things.
At greenhouse gas emissions, it's part of the challenge, right? As Catherine says, I have my car, and so the rest of you don't need a car. Or, I mean, it's trying to get people to change how they get around, and they don't have that concept. I don't think that we've taught them yet that you can survive without a car, because it is blasphemy. You cannot vote for anything unless you have at least 2 parking spots and 15 guest spots to go along with it. It's crazy. So when we think about housing too, it's how to get people to understand, as Mayor Blakespear said, this is for you. It's not for them. It's not for others. This is for you. And I try to put out this example. When you talk about adding more housing, look at your streets today. There's not enough housing, and there's more people living in every single house that you have on your street. Look at the cars all along the street. So you've already allowed the density in your neighborhoods. It's just it's overcrowding, and that is not very healthy. It's not healthy for your community. Your community would be healthier if you had additional housing so people could thrive in their own house. And so the densities, you're already living with the density. as Mayor Blakespear said, your quality of life has already been diminished because you have too many people in each house that you have on your street. And it would be much better quality of life if everyone had their own.
Absolutely. So thank you all for your comments. You know, it does, as Mayor Blakespear is talking about, it takes the courage, the conviction to change some of these issues. Mayor Alejandra Sotelo-Solis, you talked about the innovation, you know, and so many other things that it takes, and we can't do it alone. So thank you, Laurie, for your closing comments on that one. So in our last minutes together, we do have a couple questions from the group. I think we started leaning into this one. I'd like to share it out. We have, are there guidelines for determining home ownership rental rates, best practices for communities? Who'd like to kick us off with that one? Yeah.
Well, I was looking at that question, and the way that I was interpreting that question, you know, there are a lot of things in there potentially, but if you look at like, what do people earn? And then you say that you're supposed to spend about 1/3 of your income on housing. So like if somebody earns $50,000, this is all kind of rough math, but let's say they have $1,000 a month to spend on housing. So how many housing units are available for $1,000 a month? You know, it's like, and if you're saying there are very few because we haven't had the supply that's created, then, you know, those are being sucked up by people who make $100,000, and there's very little left for the people who are making $50,000 or $40,000 or $20,000. And so, you know, it kind of sucks all the way down to the bottom where there's the overcrowding and people are doubling up and all these other things. So the guidelines are that you should spend about 1/3 of your income on housing, not 50%, not 80%. And people end up doing that because they just are not able to find anything in those really lower areas. And that's part of the, like I said, the imprecise nature of the housing market that we have in our society now, is that we are just not able to provide what's needed given the economy and what people earn and that kind of thing. So, and there was one other, since I don't see any other questions, I'll just make one other like little point about like, what is it, how can we help? Because this is about women too, right? Women and housing. So what can we do to help women? And I do think one thing that's really important is just that we all try to do our little part. Like one of the things that's been important to me is to elevate women into commissions, into the council seats, like to really, I'm always thinking about who could run for office in these districts that are in Encinitas, and finding people to sit at the table with me so that we can continue to have, you know, the kind of robust dialogue like this that we're having today. So I think that reflection on like, what in your sphere, where can you help promote women? That's something that we all can do our little part. And then the last thing I'll just say, because I know we're running out of time here, is that this question of like, how do we change the narrative on things? You know, that phrase or that quote, I think it's from Churchill, but it's that power is taken, it's not given. So it's like, if you want to see more homes or you want to see more women at the table, you have to take that. You have to say, I want this. I am willing to fight for this, because power ultimately does come from the bottom up. We represent people. Mayor Sotelo-Solis and I don't get to sit in these seats unless we're speaking to somebody who, and they are choosing us to sit at the table. So creating that groundswell beneath is really what's needed in order to have the leaders who make the decisions you want. Because a lot of times there's that focus on, we just need better leadership to make different decisions. But ultimately the leadership is reflecting the community that they are representing. And so being part of the solution means that you're building that foundation from the bottom up so that people can sit in those seats and make the choices that you want. That's ultimately, you know, our democratic process. But I think it's good to remember that, because it can be really easy to just point at like way out there and say, those other people in power should make different decisions. But it really does always come back to looking in the mirror.
And I would say that recognizing that once we're at the table, you have two hands, you best bring two other people with you, and recognizing that they need that support, and not only the support, but the way with which you show that support is, you know, by a text and saying, hey, you got this. Did you hear about this grant opportunity? Did you hear about this job right now, since we're talking about careers, did you hear about this educational opportunity? And as elected officials, it's recognizing too that women are not in the pipeline necessarily for leadership. You know, we all have our various lives that we live outside of being elected officials, but it's not seen as a value necessarily. It's seen as a burden. It's seen as, oh, well, then can you really focus on your job? Can you really bring back this perspective if you are dealing with fill in the blank caregiving for an elder, a child, or what have you? So I think recognizing that leadership is that support once you're at the table, and making sure that you push the infrastructure to support that. And now we have Zoom, you know, many people like this because they have that flexibility. And remember, not that long ago, there was a time where many women were told you can't work from home. Sorry, there's not that capability. Now, I think there is that capability, and I think we've all proven it, that it's possible and we can be successful at it. So I think all those elements, and I would encourage you all to run for a board, and it's applying for a board or commission, possibly running for office, staying engaged, and then even voicing your opinion at those council meetings or housing authority meetings as we discuss whether it be zoning or a housing element, which is what we're working on in our city. You really want to know kind of what it means, because you're planning for now, but you're also planning for your kids or your grandchildren or the neighbor's kids' future. And we all need to have a voice at that table.
Thank you. We have a fun question to ask at the end, and I see one more came in around the housing demand. Oh, sorry, I heard a little. I'd like to try to ask a fun question and see if we can get to the housing demand question at the end too. The question is basically around what we're doing to address the demand of housing in our region. I think it's a good question. Not sure if we have a time to go through it entirely. Would anyone like to? Laurie, I mean, we're building homes, you know, here in San Diego.
We're building homes.
But
yeah, trying to address the demand. We need to build and invest more capital and make it available. We talk about the balance of home ownership and rental. California has the lowest home ownership rate since World War II. And when you think about, you know, the child that moved in the house at 8 months, when you own a home, you create community, you create community fabric. You pay attention to the electeds, you pay attention to the parks, you pay attention to your neighbors. It changes your community values.
Thank you. All right, our last fun question for the end. In the spirit of International Women's Day, we wanted to acknowledge the contributions of women that have had an impact in our lives. So if you could give us a quick, maybe 30 seconds or a minute, we can go over if the audience is okay with it, on the women that have the greatest inspired you in your life, greatest inspiration in your lives, and why. Laurie, would you like to kick us off with that question?
I have a really good example. Lorraine Boyce was the first woman mayor for our city of Escondido, and she was elected in 1976 at a time when her husband was a physician, and the other 4 councilmen would often ask her, shouldn't you be home cooking dinner for your husband? And but she persevered, and you can imagine in the 70s, bringing up topics like housing and childcare. The city of Escondido had never entertained those ideas. But before she left office, the city was supporting housing, low-income housing, and childcare, much to their dismay. And she actually got a bike path installed that they never thought should have been done, but she got it done. So a woman in the 70s that got something done.
Thank you.
And she's still alive.
Amazing.
Yep, in their 90s.
Mayor Catherine Blakespear, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. So I think the woman who's inspired me the most is my mom. I think for many, that's probably your life. You know, my mom is an attorney, and she always owned her power. So she was somebody who, she still is somebody who's very much a mentor to me. She said to me she'd always say to me, there's always room at the top for the best. And I think it was a kind of recognition of the value that women bring, and also that we need to have more of that at the top. And so the sense of her being enough, that she brought herself to it, and that was a lot and enough, was like something that I think I absorbed as a young woman, and have always tried to foster that in my daughter and in the community members around me, that there are a lot of different ways to be, and that the way that you be and you show up in the world is great. And don't spend time apologizing for it, wishing you were different, trying to cover up or apologize or be small. Like, try to lean into your life, try to own your power. And I feel like those are all the lessons that we need as women in order to take those seats at the table, in order to really change the world. And it affects, everything, like all sectors of society. But I think ultimately it did come down to the role model created by my mom.
Nice.
Thank you for sharing. Last but not least, Mayor Alejandra Sotelo-Solis, if you could please share.
She's being a mom.
Sorry, yeah. The other ones are watching Dora the Explorer. So I am, for me, it is, I would agree, my mom, my grandmothers, and each one of those women has taught me about being fierce, being strong, being resilient. And I have to tell you, the girls, my daughters, they basically, the other day they were arguing, and I was like, why are you guys fighting? Like, please stop. And one of them, the oldest is 9 and the twins are 8. And the older twin said, no, she's trying to take my career choice. Well, she didn't say it in those words. She's trying to take my job. And I said, what do you mean? What? I want to be president first. I want to be the first Latina president. And she said because she's older, she's going to be the first Latina president first. That's not fair. She's taking my career. And then she started crying, like, she's taking this from me. And I'm thinking, wow, these little ones are feeling empowered enough, one, to have a conversation about, taking each other's career, but 2, what the career is. Okay, they can be whatever career they want. And that to me just meant the world. So to me, my children are also my inspiration, knowing that they can strive. And yes, I'm not about the bootstraps mentality, but they will be able to come and ask mom any questions. And if I don't know the answer, I'll find somebody who does, and, work our damnedest to make sure that they have the best quality of life that I can give them and my husband can give them. So for them, but I just thought it was hilarious, again, why are you taking my career choice? And, and I know one of them is probably going to get to that point. So it makes me proud.
Thank you all for sharing your stories with us. I know we went 2 minutes over, but I thank you all for being such great panelists, such great leaders in our community. I appreciate you all so much, and our audience for being such a great audience today as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Karen for closing remarks.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Blakespear, Mayor Sotelo-Solis, Laurie, and especially thank you to CEO for moderating today, and my colleague Bridget, who with her brilliance, technical expertise, imagination, and creativity pulled us all together. She did a lot of research for some of these great stats and questions as well. So in closing, I ask that all of you make a little pledge to yourself today that this learning opportunity is not your last action in regard to housing equity for women. The women we heard from today are working hard, and there are many great people doing a lot of great work. We ask you to join us as we continue to work to make sure that families have the opportunity to have stable and affordable. We can make it very easy for you. You can register for this year's Women Build event. You can take part as an active advocate for affordable home ownership and affordable housing through Habitat's Cost of Home campaign. And I think Bridget will plop that in the chat if anybody wants a link to our website for that information. And with that, I wish you all a very happy International Women's Day and a great evening. Don't forget to offer a special toast to the women who've had a positive impact on you. Thank you.